The coherence-based genealogical method is used to establish the text of the Novum Testamentum Graecum Editio Critica Maior, or ECM. This method has been dubbed a black box because it has been difficult to understand and has lacked a way for users to edit data. Until now, most researchers outside of the INTF and Münster have only been able to read about the method and see the results of editorial work. This presentation will explain how users can download an open-source CBGM environment, edit their own local stemmata, and reestablish genealogical coherence accordingly. I hope this discussion will make the method more transparent. The presentation intends to equip individual scholars and editorial teams with the means to use the CBGM to test out their own theories of the transmission of the New Testament. Because the creation of this open source CBGM is an ongoing project, suggestions on how to improve it are welcome. The CBGM can be downloaded on Windows, Mac, or Linux. Here's the website. At the moment, only ACTS is available. The version of ACTS is the fourth phase of the CBGM, and I'll explain what constitutes a phase in a little bit. First, we'll give a quick run-through on how to download the CBGM. My examples are from a Mac operating system, but Windows will be very similar. Step 1. If you do not already have the Docker application installed on your computer, go to this website, download and install Docker. It will take a few minutes. Step 2. The next instruction is create a new directory and change into it. This means make a new folder, name it what you want, and put it where you want. Then go to your terminal app. I put my folder on my desktop, so I have to first change the directory to desktop. So I type in cd desktop. Then I change the directory to the name of my folder. I name my folder Docker1, so I type in cd Docker1. Step 3. Use the following docker-compose.yml. This means copy this script into a text document. You can use Text Wrangler, for example, and save the file as docker-compose.yml and put it into the new folder you just made. Step 4, go to terminal, and you might have to use a new tab to bring the command prompt back. Then type in docker-compose up. Step 5, point your browser to the URL localhost 5000, which means type this URL into your internet browser. And now you've downloaded the CBGM. As you can see, the menu in genealogical queries for ACTS on the INTS website is identical to the Docker container you've just installed. A Docker container is a downloadable package that includes everything you need to run a program. The CBGM can now be run on your own computer locally, and you don't need internet access to make changes in it. All changes are automatically saved in your computer. Let me take a step back now to explain how the CBGM works so you can become familiar with its interactivity. The CBGM is the method the editors of a major critical edition of the Greek New Testament, the Editio Critica Maior, or ECM, used to deal with the heavily contaminated New Testament manuscript tradition. The ECM has a guiding line, the initial text, also called the Ausgangstext. Each word in the guiding line is numbered and corresponds to the apparatus below. So far, the ECM has been published for the Catholic Letters and for Acts. The Gospel of Mark will arrive next year. The ECM of the Gospel of John is also in preparation. Unlike many editions of the Greek New Testament, the ECM is based on full transcriptions of manuscripts. These full transcriptions are entered into the CBGM, and word by word or phrase by phrase comparisons of texts are made. First, a tally of agreements between all witnesses is made. This is called pre-genealogical coherence. This type of coherence is a criterion for determining the probability whether the witness is allowed to take into account a genealogical relationship between variants. Normally, a lack of pre-genealogical coherence within an attestation implies coincidental multiple development of variants. Low pre-genealogical coherence within an attestation implies multiple coincidental emergence of the variant. Just considering pre-genealogical coherence, we cannot say which witness is the ancestor or descendant of the other. It has no genealogical direction. For example, in Acts 1:3, there is the omission of Ealton. In 3:26 and 18:37. It is not a coincidence that both omit the word, because if you look at their pre-genealogical coherence, we see these witnesses agree 98.6% of the time. This is an example of high pre-genealogical coherence. An example of low pre-genealogical coherence is at Acts 1:7. This involves another pronoun. Either Jesus told the apostles, "You are not permitted to know the times or the periods that the Father has set by his own authority," or we are not permitted to know the times or periods that the father has set by his own authority. Manuscripts 378, 1884, and Lectionary 60 read the pronoun we. We know this type of change from humon to haemon occurs frequently in manuscripts, but here we can see that it happened independently from another. 378 agrees only 82.65% with 1884. It agrees only 87.05% with Lectionary 60, and Lectionary 60 agrees with 1884 only 80.1%. It is most likely, especially in the case of 1884, that this variant was created independently in these witnesses. Therefore, pre-genealogical coherence does not just give us an overall picture of manuscript agreements, but it can inform us about what has taken place at specific passages concerning the transmission or multiple occurrence of a variant. It also helps us with constructing the local stemmata, which I now turn to. What is a local stemma? At every variant passage, a local stemma of text is created by the editors. This is a hypothesis about which variants came from which variants. In our example with pronoun, it's clear that haemon, variant B, came from humon, variant A. This is based on the small attestation that has low pre-genealogical coherence. Variant A was established as the Ausgangstext, which is connected to the asterisk. When a variant is assigned to the asterisk, it means it is the Ausgangstext. Constructing the local stemmata is often straightforward, but it can be complicated if there are many variants. For example, here are 7 variants, with variant A selected as the Ausgangstext, and the remaining variants have variant A as their origin. There's also the possibility to assign a variant to unknown origin. It is not necessary to enter all the variants into the local stemma at all costs. Further evaluation requires clear statements. Either a variant is designated as genealogically dependent on another variant, or on several if they explain the variant together, or the origin of a variant is designated as uncertain. In the latter case, the variant is not taken into consideration for further evaluation unless it should be possible to make a clear statement about it later. All cases in which no definitive statement is possible must remain neutral in the following evaluation. If you do not know the source of a variance, you move that to the question mark. Sometimes textual decisions are left open, resulting in a split line reading in the ECM, meaning no variant could be assigned to the asterisk and at least 2 variants are assigned to the question mark. These variants, marked by a diamond in the apparatus, are seen as equal to the Ausgangstext. But remember that when there are many variants and none of them are assigned to the asterisk, that does not mean that all of them must comprise the split line. The question mark is for genealogical purposes to mean we do not know the origin of the variants assigned to it. Sometimes the local stemma can be complicated with many variants that cannot be explained. Now, what role does pre-genealogical coherence play when constructing the local stemmata? In Acts 1:13, we have a lot of similar variants, 9 to be exact. Let us start with variant A. It was decided to be the initial text, primarily because it has good coherence in a group of close Ausgangstext-related witnesses. But within the attestation of A, there are other witnesses that are not coherent. 049, for example, has a 88% agreement with the witness in the close Ausgangstext strand, 1642, which is not coherent. The others in this attestation have a similar low pre-genealogical coherence with the others, and their closest potential ancestors are witnesses to other variants. Therefore, these were separated out into another group, A2, so that they do not interfere with the coherence of the rest of the A attestation. We know variant A is the Ausgangstext, but we do not know the origin of the A2 group, so it is assigned to the question mark in the local stemma. Because the witness of variant B is pre-genealogically close to one of the witnesses in A2, and that it is textually similar to it, variant B can be assigned to A2. Based on its textual similarity to A and its relatively high pre-genealogical coherence with witnesses in A, variant C is assigned to A. Variant D is missing one of the names, James, from the reading, which makes it not textually similar to the other variants and is placed to the question mark. The rest of the stemma is constructed in this way. In the end, we now have a hypothesis about which witnesses have a prior text than others in this passage. We say, for example, variant I comes from F, which comes from H. Therefore, the witnesses of H have a prior text than the witnesses of variant F, and all the witnesses of H and F have a prior text than the witnesses of variant I. The local stemmata form a hypothesis about which text descended from other texts. After the local stemmata are created for all 5,000 variant passages in X, a descendant-ancestor relationship is formed between all witnesses. This is called genealogical coherence. Genealogical coherence is based on the number of prior and posterior variants, which determine a predominant direction of textual flow between witnesses. If a witness has more prior variants than another, it is a potential ancestor of that witness. So now we've covered the steps of how to download and install your own CBGM, and now that you've heard the basics, how to construct a local stemmata in the CBGM, you can begin modifying it in your own local CBGM yourself. Making a change is very simple. Click and drag the variant where you want it to go. This is the part you want to interact with if you disagree or want to experiment with what the editors have done. If you think a variant other than A is the Ausgangstext, you move that to the asterisk in the local stemma. If you do not know the source of the variant, you move that to the question mark. If you want to make a split line where in the ECM terms both variants are equal to the Ausgangstext, you move both variants to the question mark. You can construct the local stemmata any way you like, but keep in mind it builds genealogical relationships depending on how you do it. If you want to separate manuscripts in one attestation into a subtree, first you split the variant by right-clicking on it. Then find the group that you want to separate and right-click on those to add them to the subtree you just made. So, after you made all the changes you want, then you run the CBGM on your local implementation to see the results and new manuscript relationships. So, back to terminal. Now you type in Docker, compose, run, ntg, app server, CBGM. When it is finished, refresh your browser for calculations to take effect. After running the CBGM, this results in a new phase. The Docker container that we started with is from Acts Phase 4. The editors of the ECM do not run the CBGM until all variants and all verses of the whole New Testament book have been gone through. That way, each variant is approached from the same standpoint. After all variants have been gone through, then the editors run the CBGM to bring it into a new phase. This is the iterative process of the CBGM. There are over 5,000 variant passages in X, each with a local stemma of text. That means if you want the picture of genealogical coherence to change, you probably have to make several dozens of changes, at minimum, to the local stemmata. Just for fun, I've changed about 80 local stemmata to reverse relationship between two manuscripts. According to the CBGM of Acts Phase 4, manuscript 35 is the closest potential ancestor, the manuscript with the most prior readings, of manuscript 18. Here's what the general textual flow looks like before modification, with 35 above 18. After changing the local stemmata and running the CBGM, the relationship is now reversed, now with 18 as the potential ancestor of 35. So how did I do this? One easy way to do this is to go to Comparison of Witnesses to see all variants where there is a relationship established between the two. Just type in the two witnesses you wish to see, and a list will appear with every instance where the two manuscripts have text available for comparison. Here, just click on the passage, which brings me to the local stemma, and I'll modify the stemma so the attestation with 18 is prior to the attestation with 35. You can go back to Compare Witnesses and see the result. Now, in this place, 18 is prior to 35. So here's what it looks like before and after making 18 the prior witness in the first half of Acts. The pre-genealogical coherence stays the same, but 35 as the ancestor has changed to the descendant. This is just one simple idea of how to experiment with the CBGM by prioritizing one manuscript over others. Another simple option to play with the CBGM would be to find the shortest readings and see what the textual flow diagrams look like when they are selected as the Ausgangstext. Or you can do what the editors of the ECM do and base decisions on philology, transcriptional probabilities, and pre-genealogical and genealogical coherence. Even if you adopt the same principles as the editors of the ECM, you may come to different conclusions because, as we all know, the CBGM does not establish the text for us. It also involves discussion between editors. I hope this clarifies the workflow and editorial process of the CBGM. This Docker container has been long in the making. It is essentially the work of Klaus Wachtel and Volker Kruger at the INTF and Marcello Peritoner, programmer at Cologne Center for E-Humanities. If you want to see the documentation for this CBGM, it can be found here. And if you are into reading source code, you can find that at this website. I think that after experimenting with the CBGM Docker container, you should have a better understanding of how the CBGM works. The CBGM Docker container is just in the initial stages of development. So far, only Acts is available, and other books will become available probably only after their ECM is published. Besides adding other books of the New Testament, there are many ways the Docker container could be improved. For one, after local stemmata are changed and different variants are set as the initial text, the program will not show the new variant as the guiding line. The local stemma and textual flow will be calculated correctly, but the Greek text guiding line will not change. This is very difficult to change at the moment, one reason being that the words are all numbered, and changing the initial text to have a word more or a word less could potentially shift all variants in that verse to different numbers. Another side effect of running the CBGM is that the coherence may change between witnesses after modification of the local stemmata. There's a way for the editors of the ECM to run congruence checks to see where there are problematic passages, but this is not yet the case in the Docker container implementation. You might also want to change the length of a variant. They were created as short as possible and as long as necessary, but nonetheless, you will bring your own ideas to the text. It would be beneficial to give the user the option to modify the parameters of variants, but again, this is difficult to do and there's not yet an easy way, even when the editors of the ECM themselves have to make changes. It would also be nice to be able to write your own notes at any passage you want and export them. This feature is already possible, but has not yet been added. One more thing, it would of course be nice to be able to add new manuscripts to the CBGM and utilize it within the NTVMR. This is one of the goals we're working on. We've started a new collaboration with the Service Center in Digital Humanities at the University of Münster, and one of our priorities is the future development of the CBGM. So in the meantime, as we work to develop it further, I hope that the CBGM Docker container will not only help offer a clearer picture of the inner workings of the CBGM, but also serve as a useful tool for textual research.